بسم الله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. أما بعد. Today we have this gathering, and which is you all invited for by Helping Hand Sawaeid, to speak about not one of the largest humanitarian crisis on earth in the modern history since the Second World War. Not one of them, not the second biggest, but the worst humanitarian crisis in modern history. And yet, being hushed down, nobody speaking about, nobody looking at, nobody dealing with, and you see it nowhere. And just the struggle that I've been watching Yasin and Muhammad and their colleagues just to gather the people to attend this event tells you a lot about what's going on. So, because of the speciality of the crisis we will be talking about, I thought to cover it in 3 different angles, which is the first angle. We are in the masjid, the house of Allah, so therefore, what that have to do with you as a Muslim? So the Islamic perspective on what's going on in Sudan. The second perspective, which is why Sudan? And the third perspective, which is everybody look at first, which is the humanitarian crisis and the statistical information. And for the people who don't know me, I'm Yaslam Altayeb. I'm one of the survivors of this atrocity. I was a captive held by the RSF in Sudan. So I didn't hear about it, I didn't read about it, I didn't see it on social media. I lived it and I witnessed it and I lived every part of it. So from the fear, from the murders, from the tortures, from the hunger, from the anxious. So I lived it all. And in your presence as well, so today we've been also blessed that we have our brother Sadiq Ismail. He was my mate in captivity. He was held with me. So we are the only 2 Sudanese people who were held by the RSF from the UK. And he's here, and he will have a word as well in a bit. So Islamically, what's happening in Sudan? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in Surah Al-Baqarah, وَلَنَبْلُوَنَّكُمْ بِشَيْءٍ مِّنَ الْخَوْفِ وَالْجُوعِ وَنَقْصٍ مِّنَ الثَّمَرَاتِ وَالْأَمْوَالِ وَالْأَنفُسِ وَالثَّمَرَاتِ وَبَشِّرِ الصَّابِرِينَ. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, we will test you as a Muslim with turbulences and trials, where you will lose your possessions, your wealth, your health, and people will die. And give glad tidings for the people who have sabr, who have patience to pass through this. الذين إذا أصابتهم مصيبة قالوا إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. For those who being through these turbulences will say, we are from Allah and we will return to Allah. So they will return all their matters to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, and the Prophet ﷺ said in hadith That is, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will test and try everybody. And that some people, that Allah will give them a place in Jannah, in a level that they will never reach that level by their action, by their deeds. So what He will do, He will put them through trials and turbulences and suffering, so that He will give them more rewards to lift them up to the position that He wants them in. So that will put the questions to every single Muslim mind. Who is going through the real test? So we know there is a test and there is a fitna or a trial. So the people who is going through the turbulences and the suffering, Allah will choose from within them martyrs, as He said in the Quran, that He will choose from within them the martyrs and the people who will be, that the Prophet ﷺ, he said, when you see the people with the suffering in the day of judgment, the people who did not suffer, who did not see turbulences, they will wish if they will go back to this life and their flesh will be ripped out by the iron combs from their bones, so that they will achieve what these people will achieve in the day of judgment. So the people in Sudan, in all the suffering they're going through, in all the turbulences they will going through, in Islamically, it's a way of purification and lifting in their position in the hereafter. For us as a Muslims who believe that this will not pass without the rewards which is deserved. The Prophet ﷺ said, the rewards of the people in these turbulences, which is in this kind of patience, is measured not by numbers. So some kind of deeds, that is, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not give you the rewards for by numbers, some tens, so up to 700 folds and more. Prayers, zikr, and these kind of things. But except a certain kind of rewards, like where the patience and in this kind of turbulences, the Prophet ﷺ, he said, the reward will be poured like by shuffles, but for the person who will pass this kind of turbulences. So the test is, the question is the test for the people who is going through this test, like in Sudan and in Gaza and in Kashmir and in other places, or the test upon us, the rest of the Ummah, was how we will react, how we will behave. Because as a Muslim, the Prophet ﷺ, he said, that is the example of the Muslims between them in their unity and love and compassion is like the single body. If one part of that body suffer, the rest of the body will suffer with it by fever and pain. So, did the rest of the body suffer? Now, we all experienced the crisis in Sudan, but we also experienced the crisis in Yemen, we experienced the crisis in Libya, we experienced the crisis in Gaza, and we experienced the crisis in Kashmir. We have the Rohingya, we have the Uyghur in China. And before that, some of you didn't witness it, Chechnya, Serbia, the Bosnia and Kosovo. So for us, we witnessed all that. What did we do about it? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He created us. Yes, He said, وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ, that I did not create ins and jinn except for to worship me. But that is the generic purpose of creation. There is a specific purpose for the men as son of Adam. Then there is more specific for the male, and then specific for female. So there is purposes for each one. Then there is a specific purpose for the individual. Now, these kind of specific purposes is the first things we will be questioned in front of Allah about. In the action and the act of deed, in the prayer and fasting, and so the ibadah, the act of worship, yes, the first things we will be questioned with is the prayer. But before the prayer, there is some cleaning of who is going to be to the main questions. So the first is the Tawheed, if the person is pure Muslim or not. Then he go to the second step, and then the third step, and so on. And the most important question is the question of the purpose of your own creation. Why you were created. If you do not fulfill that condition, you do not fulfill the purpose of your creation, the rest of the things you will do, it doesn't matter. The Prophet ﷺ said in the prayer question, he said, إِذَا صَلُحَتْ, the prayer, if it is correct, then the rest of the act of deeds will be okay. وَإِذَا فَسَدَتْ, if it is not good, it doesn't matter what he did, the person after that. You can be charitable, can be very good in fasting, and so the priorities, the most important steps is the person he take his priorities right. What is the purpose of my existence in this life? One of the purposes for mankind, is to establish the deen of Allah on earth. And establishing the deen of Allah on earth is actually not just the spreading of the Islam, but making life or earth habitable, working. And while you are doing this, you have the first most important pillar, which is the scholars are considering the sixth pillar of Islam. Al-amru bil-ma'ruf wa-nahy 'anil munkar. Al-amru bil-ma'ruf wa-nahy 'anil munkar, which is enjoining the good and forbidding the evil. And enjoining the good and the forbidding the evil is actually what constrain every single Muslim in their relation between each other. Al-amru bil-ma'ruf wa nahy anil munkar is actually how to support your brothers and sisters, how you advise them and how you lift the harm from them. So you have an Islamic duty. It's not by choice. You will be asked about that duty, a responsibility. Whatever will fall upon your ummah, that is your responsibility. You have to answer in front of Allah about. The Prophet ﷺ, there is a lot of examples I can go through one by one. But at least that is, if I can relate all these issues with what's happening to the ummah right now. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, لا تزال قدم ابن آدم in the day of judgment until he will be, the foot of Bani Adam will not be lifted in the day of judgment until he will be asked about four things. About his time, where he's spending, and in what he's spending. About his wealth, where he get it from and where he spend it. Now, your own wealth, it's not yours, it's Allah's. Your own time, you're given that time for a specific task. What did you do about the task you're supposed to have been done? Now that is critical to go back to the subject of Sudan, how that relates to the Sudanese people. It relates to Sudanese people because in the second point that we're going to cover about why Sudan, that everybody, even though Sudan is hundreds of times on the side of Gaza, even though Sudan have 50 million and the people are in direct suffering, 25 million, we're not talking about hundreds of thousands, we're talking about millions of people, but yet the people, they do not deal with it the same way like other crises. So why is that? That is for many reasons. The first reason, which is we will cover also in the second point, which is why Sudan. Because the shadow banning, that's part of the war against Sudan, is actually to keep it away from the media, to keep it away of the awareness of the Muslims, to keep it away from the people who are active in finding out and mischaracterizing it as in it's a civil war, Sudanese people killing each other, which is far from the truth. It has nothing to do with the Sudanese people. Sudanese people are victims of it. The second point is people, they look at it and sadly, ignorance and racism, they see it as Africans, they killing each other. And as a Muslim, that is a very heinous and serious issue. Not as a humanitarian, as a Muslim. If that is one of the reasons, then that is a very dangerous disease in the heart of the person who is thinking that way. Because a Muslim is a Muslim. And the body, and I gave an example like this before, that is the body that the Prophet ﷺ described, does not recognize that is the pain is coming from the elbow, and the elbow, because it's darker skin than the back of the hand, is a lighter skin. So the pain from the lighter skin will be more painful than the elbow. The body doesn't see it that way. It sees a suffering from a single place, from the body, single part. It doesn't matter which part. It's one part from the whole body. So where it is, it doesn't matter. There is an issue in the body. It needs to be looked at. So why is Sudan? Because of time. Sudan, number one, a lot of people, they don't know. Sudan is the oldest civilization on earth. People, they don't know this. It's the oldest civilization on earth. It's the oldest Kush civilization and the Nubian civilization, which is far more before the pharaohs. We're talking about 7,000-8,000 years old. Number two, it's not a messed up country. It's not a lost country. It's a broken country by others. So the civilization of Sudan existed thousands and thousands of years ago. Sudan is the only country in Africa contain over 500 different ethnicity and tribes. So that will make it the people who used to come from all the way from Mauritania in West Africa and from Nigeria, from Mali, from Angola, Southwest Africa, they will be traveling for trade and later in days for Hajj and Umrah. People, they don't know that is Sudan, Port Sudan, the port of Sudan is the nearest city after Jeddah to Mecca. People, they don't know that. The cities of Sudan in the Red Sea is far closer to Mecca than the cities of Riyadh and even Medina. Far more closer to Mecca than Medina. So the people, they traveling from Africa, going to Saudi Arabia for Hajj and Umrah, they stay in Sudan. Most of them, because in the past they traveled by land, walking or by camels, so they settle in Sudan. And by hundreds of years, they became Sudanese. That's why you have the diversity in Sudanese people. If you look at Sudanese people, you have different shape and colors, and it's a continent by itself because of their different heritage, where they come from, different cultures. Now they became Sudanese, but their extended tribes, their extended roots is actually back in the countries of Africa. So automatically Sudan has the soft diplomacy to access all these countries easily. That's why Sudan is more liked in Africa than any other African countries. The second thing, the division in Africa itself, the North African, which is they consider to be Mediterranean and more close to Europe, and is more European countries, the people, even how they look is different than the rest of the Africans. And then lower than them is they call them the sub-Sahara countries, which is the African countries, the black African. Now the sub-Sahara countries, the only country linked the north and the south and the sub-Sahara is Sudan. Plus the position in the Red Sea. Plus, Sudan is the richest country in the Islamic and Arabs and African world. From oil, gas, gold, minerals, rare earth minerals. People talk about the future wars, which is wars for food supplies and minerals and water. Who control the water, control the world. Sudan got 7 rivers, and Sudan got the Nile. People know the Nile was Egypt. But actually the Sudan got the most of the Nile. It started from Khartoum itself. The 2 rivers which is supplying the Nile, making the Nile, they are in Sudan. But in numbers, the Nile supply Egypt, which is, they call it the life stream for Egypt, is the Nile. They call it the gift of the Nile. The Egypt take from the Nile 56 billion cubic meters. That is Egypt's share from the Nile. Every year they get 56 billion cubic meters. Sudan got the 6 rivers beside the Nile, but in the same time got 3 under the ground lakes. One of them is called the Nubian Lake. The second is Darfur Lake, which is Al-Ghazafi, he done the Great River. He bombed water from under the ground and he created a river. They call it the Great River. He created from the water of Darfur. The Nubian Lake, which is in the north of Sudan, this one got 220 billion cubic meters renewable every year. So 4 times Egypt share of the Nile. Only one lake under the ground in Sudan from the three contain what the Nile possesses and renewable every year. Sudan is the agriculture country, but yet 73% of Sudanese agriculture is irrigated by rain. We don't use the rivers and the underground water. We just use the rain. And that tells you how much Sudan is blessed. That is in water. Right now, what the people, they don't know also, the food security of the Gulf, most of it is from Sudan. Emirates is triggered this war in Sudan, and they have 100,000 acres in the north of Sudan, and they call it Amtar, which is rains project, to supply them with their whatever they need from vegetables. So Sudan is critical as for minerals, for supplies, for position, where it sits in the Red Sea, and the security of the Red Sea is far more important right now. And the security of Saudi Arabia from the west, if you target Saudi Arabia right now, is under siege. From the east, what they call Shaitan al-Arab. From the south, Yemen is in hustle. The west, Sudan. The north, you know who. So Sudan, Saudi Arabia now is under siege. If Sudan falls, Mecca and Medina is under threat. Direct threat. Is not by indirect or a distance. No. It's a direct threat. Egypt from the south. And in order for you to establish Greater Israel from the Nile to the Euphrates, in order for that to happen, you need to take Sudan out. Sudan have to be dismantled, have to be divided, and have to be controlled. So that's why Sudan is being targeted. Another thing that everybody needs to know is the war in Sudan did not, you knew about it in 15 April 23. That is where the bullets being fired. But the war in Sudan literally started in 1983. It started before that, since the independence from the British rule, by triggering the war between the North and the South, but that was under management. The issue started in 1983 when the Sudanese people changed their system, the whole country system, the way of ruling, from circular system, British law, to Sharia compliant ruling, which is still until today. And that happened in 1982. In 1983, the first sanctions imposed on Sudan. If you go and investigate and check yourself, what did Sudan do to the world to make it the most evil country on earth? That it suffered not just from the war, but the most severe sanctions and embargoes on earth. Sudan did not pass a single year from the 90s until now without new imposed sanctions or embargoes. What for? Accused supporting the Palestinian, financing Hamas, but many do. What did the Sudan do? Accused that is actually been involved in the attack on the American ship, which is the American courts proved Sudan had nothing to do with it. But yet, Sudan is being sanctioned from medical supplies, financial transaction, technologies. Right now, you can take your phone and use it, do whatever with it. In Sudan, you can't do these kind of things. Not because the country cannot afford it, but it's not allowed. Even in the social media, there is a shadow banning. The more you do advertise things for Sudan, it gets pushed back. The algorithm take it off. And they will find a lot of ways to stop you from supporting Sudan or shedding a light on what's going on in Sudan. What also the people, they don't know, we are one of the biggest communities in the UK. People, they don't know this. Sudanese people are everywhere in the UK. The least, we have over 7,000 between specialists and consultants in the NHS as Sudanese, but identify themselves as British, sadly. Now these kind of things, so that tells you that is Sudanese people are educated, trained, and they are top in whatever they do. But how come the country is being hammered down? And as a Muslim, you need to ask a question. Why is that? Why every time this country, if Iran done something, if North Korea done something, if Russia done something, or China done something, immediately we'll see the sanctions and Sudan with it is being sanctioned. What has Sudan to do with China? It has to do with North Korea. That you sanction Sudan with it. And that tells you in the big plot that Sudan is critical for you. That is, this oligarchy is targeting for a reason. You need for yourself to ask what is that reason? You need to investigate to find out. As a Muslim, you need why your brothers and sisters being subjected to all of this. Even here in the UK, we experience it ourselves. If I go today to Lloyds Bank, carrying my Sudanese passport to open a bank account as a resident of this country, I can't. I can't open a bank account as a person who lives here. Have nothing to do with Sudan, but I am Sudanese. I can't. That is one of the things that the Sudanese people been suffering from since the 80s and the 90s. And it's still. But I challenge anyone to find what the Sudanese did to deserve such sanctions and such treatment. Now we go back to 15th of April, 23. I was there, and before it, the whole world worked very hard, the Western world, to remove the previous government because they call it Islamic government, so therefore it has to go. It's a terrorist harboring government. And it's been toppled in 2019. Since 2019, we witnessed kind of puppets being imposed upon Sudan with sort of a constitution. Is the whole war is about, the first reason for the war is about the constitution of Sudan. So there is an agreement was need to be imposed upon the Sudanese people, and that they need to impose upon us. No country on earth agreed on. Is everything that is actually Western countries, they did not approve themselves to accept in their countries, but they want to impose it in Sudan. In 2020, they dismantled the biggest Islamic organization in Africa, which is not Sudanese. It's based in Sudan, but it's not Sudanese. It's an international organization. Got the biggest Islamic university in Africa, graduated presidents and ministers in Africa. Africa University. We used to belong to Munazzamat al-Da'wa al-Islamiyya, Islamic Dawah organization. It's an international organization based in Sudan. It's a huge organization. It used to do a lot of work even in South Africa. That organization is being dismantled as a threat to Africa. The Quran used to be printed for Africa in that organization in Khartoum. The headquarters where they used to do this is being taken from the organization, and in the message they gave it to LGBTQ organization from Quran to become the headquarters of the LGBTQ. Now that's a fact. You can go check it. It happened in Sudan in 2020. Shut the Islamic organization down, turned them into the opposites. People didn't like it. Then pressure came from what is called the Quartet, which is Saudi Arabia, Emirates, America, and United Kingdom. 23, the army, or the leadership of the army, pulled out of any agreement, so they decided to have a quick coup to take over, and the coup failed. And there, here we are. First 3 months, people rallied behind the army, and this man broke down the RSF. Since we'll have a break for the Azan, inshallah. Everything that they have, so they are starting from scratch. We have over 300,000 people who been killed. This is what, as a civilian, what is being found so far. That this still we have to find out the people that is under the, in their houses, dead in their houses, and people they don't know about, the people who's being taken away. We do have, which is people nobody's talking about, we do have over 10,000 girls being taken and sold as slaves. Nobody's talking about this. We have movements of feminism and all these things, and nobody's talking about this slavery in the modern history. We have over 10,000 women being raped, some of them gang rapes, and being kept for months and months, and some of them died. Plus the one who committed suicide, We lost the family members who committed suicides because they had to witness their women or their daughters or their wives being raped in front of them. Now, all this nobody's talking about, nobody's covering. So I hope this shed a little bit light on what's happening in Sudan and awaken some people up on the immense crisis that Sudan is going through. So now we have Ali, inshallah, to say something about it. That's good.
Thank you, Sheikh. Barakallah. Thank you. I'm not going to keep you guys long, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Firstly, before I start, I want to praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the most merciful, the most just. All praises, glory and gratitude belong to Him. Firstly, I personally want to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's forgiveness that as a public figure, somebody who's in the public sphere, that I haven't done enough for Sudan. I am guilty of that, so I don't want to come here and be a participant in this talk and act like I've done something. I don't believe I've done enough, and I'm embarrassed of that, and I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive me. There's private and public reasons for that, but I hope inshallah I will try my best to raise awareness to the best of my ability. So I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive me and not take me to account in this matter. When it comes to the reminder that I want to give is from Surah Fat, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, indeed we have opened you a clear manifest victory, that Allah forgives you of your earlier shortcomings, what were in the past and what will come in future, and may complete his favor to you and guide you to the right way, and that Allah may help you with a mighty help and victory. If anybody knows this surah, they will know that this is regarding the Treaty of Hudaybiyah. In the Treaty of Hudaybiyah, the Prophet ﷺ,